Okay, part two. So this is fine liner and wash is what you would normally kind of refer to it as. The same technique can be applied with ink, so it would be pen and ink would be the same kind of technique. It's really lovely because the ink in the pens that we're going to use is water soluble. So once you put ink onto the paper, the water dilutes it, spreads it around, and it creates like a wash effect. So you've drawn it, but the wash of the water breaks the pen down, so it creates a wash. Again, you need to be careful, so use the pen that I've given you. I gave you these ones because we haven't got these ones in stock at the moment, but these are also will do exactly the same things, and this is what I would have given you if we had them at school. Avoid pens like this one. So again, that's a gel pen. They tend to not work. There's always exceptions to that, so feel free to test them if you want to, but I usually find that they don't work. So if we just do a little tester here, if I use a red one and just do like a line like that, and then the black one. So the red pens are a little bit thicker, so you might be able to tell the difference. There's a thicker line. And I've got my little pot of water and my paintbrush. So these are new. They'll have like a crispy end, and that's because they've got something called gum arabic on the end of them, which is it's a type of glue, but it's just used to hold the bristles in place. So dip it into the water, and that loosens up the bristles, and you'll find it's fine. You want to have quite a wet brush, but you don't want it so it's dripping because you can't control that. So tap it on the edge. You probably don't need to blot it at this point, but if you just place it onto the pen and then sort of wiggle it over, you can see that dissolves really quickly. Rinse your brush, and then if I go to the red pen, again, that dissolves really quickly. It's not dissolving as well. That might be something to do with the fact I'm using card, because that's what I had at home, so you might find that actually it doesn't run as well. So interestingly, these are better for this, and that's not what I expected. So a couple of ways of using them. If I just show you here, if I just draw a circle like that, and then draw a circle but go over it a couple of times like this, and then I'll draw another circle, I'll go over it once or twice there. So a little bit of water. I think I put too much on there, so I'm going to dab it a little bit. If I go over the line, it will bleed, and I get a nice kind of fuzzy edge from it. What is really nice, and I want you to try and do, is areas where there's no ink, so it leaves like a gap of the paper underneath. If I go over this one, which went over loads of times, you see how dark and black that's gone? That's because there's a lot more ink. So actually what I could do with that is actually take it, spread it out a lot more, because there's a lot more ink on there. But again, where there is no ink in the middle is lovely. And if you want to blend it, clean your brush, put your brush around the outside, and then when it touches the ink very, very gently, it will bleed out like that, so you get a little bit of a shadow, which is lovely. And that's what I'm going to show you a little bit more here. So if I put water, just clean water, so change your water as often as you need to around the outside, and then go in and just use my wet brush on the edge of the shape, it'll bleed and run really beautifully. And as it bleeds, what you'll see is that something I've probably mentioned before, or you might have heard before, is that ink's made up of lots and lots of colours. So black is made up of lots of other colours. So what you'll find is, as it gets wet and starts to run, you'll see purples, you might see a little bit of blue. As it starts to dry, the colours will change a bit. You might see a little bit of yellow, a tiny bit of pink in there as well. So you get a lot of different effects as it dries as well. So I'm going to use this one because we've established that it's nice and it works. And I'll start just with this one here. I think this is easier, it's more freeform. So using the same techniques, I'm not going to copy it exactly, there's no reason to, but I'm going to copy some areas as carefully as possible to get the textures. That's what's most important. When it comes to the brick and the wood, or the panels, it's a little bit more important that you look at the image. So if you struggle to see it through the whitewash, then use that second set of images and have that to one side, or your phone if that's what you took them on, so you can see what you're working from. So I'm just going to start with this section here actually, and I'm going to do those unusual kind of kidney shapes. I'm going to wiggle my line a little bit, because the more unsteady your line is, the more interesting it looks. There's these kind of strung together shapes, varying the scale of them and the direction of them, so sort of ad-libbing it a little bit. Where I think I might want more detail, more colour from the pen, I'm going to go over them a little bit. I don't want to make it too thick and heavy, but I definitely know that I want enough ink on there for it to run and do something interesting. If you find copying it really hard, one thing you could do is sketch it out very, very, very lightly in pencil first, and then go over it in pen. So if you hold it up against the window, you should be able to see a picture underneath it. Might not work, but I think it probably will. And then you can sketch it like so lightly you can hardly see it, and then go over that in pen if that helps. So I'm just going to put these shapes on here. I'm going to do this little bit of scribbly figure of 8. I can feel the pen really soaking into this card, so I'm not going to go too much. I can feel it catching my pen, which means that the ink is getting very soaked in. There's a chance of either ruining the pen or this just turn into a massive horrible dark lines. And then down here there's a bit of crosshatch, so I'm just going to put that in so you can see the contrast. Okay, I'll leave it there for now. Obviously you need to do quite a nice patch, or the full square actually. So dip it in some water. I learned up here that I don't want too much water, so I'm going to blot it. I can always get a bit more if I need to. And I'm just going to work around the outside of my shapes. I definitely need a bit more water. Work around the outside of my shapes. I'm going to bring it in slightly. I'm using my paintbrush so sort of lightly on the surface. I'm hardly touching it. And I'm just working around exactly as my pen was over those shapes. You'll find once it finds a bit of water that's already there, your paintbrush almost sort of gets dragged towards it. I'm keeping the inside of my shapes mostly clear. I quite like it where you get these little patches of white where it sort of tries to escape. But I'm being really delicate. What I'm not doing is just painting all over the top of it, because then there's no definition. You want to trace the lines that you've made, miss out quite a lot with your paintbrush, because you'll find that the water finds its way there anyway, so you don't want to use too much water. When it comes to this patch, I would draw circles over the top of it, because you want some of the line to stay intact. So you can see how it sort of got engulfed there with water, so I hardly touched that, so I'm not going to do any more to that, I'm leaving it. Okay. I'm going to go around. I'm not going on all the lines at all because I want to be able to see some of the pen coming through. Down here, I'm going to just paint in a couple of lines over the top. I'm not by any means following all those lines, but what's quite nice is I can extend it up there like that now. So this is getting really heavy, so I'm only going to put a tiny bit of water on those bits. And then what I might do is just put a bit of water over here and then just let it bleed out ever so slightly, to create like a bit of a wash around it like that, so it sort of settles into the page. Ooh. Like that. Okay, if I turn that around and on this side up there, have a go at bricks. So if I lean over, yeah, so I'm going to do this a bit smaller because I'm leaning over, I've not got much space. Bricks is different. So bricks are clear geometric shapes, and there's a rigid pattern that you would expect to see. So I would copy almost exactly what you can see in your picture. They are not perfect. They are not ruler sharp. So I'm making my line quite wibbly, and I'm not drawing in the render, which is the stuff that holds them together, because on our drawing we don't need to draw it. It sort of is. It doesn't exist because it's a shapes that we're interested in. We're not interested in the render in between, and that'll take care of itself. So I've done those shapes there. I'll just do this row here. So my lines are quite accurate. If you struggle to do that, you could use a ruler very lightly in pencil first, just to help you get the accuracy of those lines. One thing that people often do when they are drawing bricks is they give them very round edges like that. And actually sometimes they are a bit like that if they're reclaimed bricks, or if they're stone, they're rounder. but when they're long and thin like these ones, so when they are rectangular, they're often quite sharp or very, very sharp on the edges. So I'm going to leave those there. What we want though is all the texture inside. So very similar to the way that we did this, I guess. Some little kind of sections that look as if they've got rocks inside. Bricks are going to be made up of a variety of aggregate. So there might be some coarser grains of stone and chippings inside. So I'm just going to go close to this. It's not all going to be in the middle because they're all made out of the same stuff, so some of it will be towards the edge. See that? And then they do actually have kind of lines in them, slightly. So I'm going to just go into them and exaggerate that slightly, because I think they look a little bit strange at the moment. I'll just do this one. And then I think what I'm going to do is a little bit of hatching and cross hatching just in some areas, trying not to make them look too patchy. I don't want them to be completely separate to each other. So I'm going to put a few little bits in like that. And then same up here. So I'm thinking about where they're going. They're quite close to other shapes inside there. I don't want them just sort of floating around like little islands on their own. That'll do. And then brush again. And then I'm going to stick with the shapes in the middle really. I'm not going to worry too much about the outside. And I'm going to try on this one to sort of spread it out a little bit, because we don't want these sort of random little islands of shapes in the middle of the bricks, because that's not what we can see. So in this case, I'm spreading it out a little bit. Sort of hovering my brush over it ever so slightly and kind of dancing it over the page, the same here, and then cleaning my brush every so often so I can go back in with some clean water, which helps spread the water around without it being too heavy, because the less you change your water, the more you're using the colour or the ink from the pen that you just worked with, so then it just ends up getting more dark and more purple. And actually we want to have some of that, but we want a nice variety. I'll just show you on this last one here what's going to happen if you just paint it. So if I just get a wet brush and paint over it, it all blends in to one. It doesn't look awful, but you've lost a lot of definition, you've lost the delicacy of these lines and these marks, and it's quite random. And often when you see something that's random, it doesn't look as highly worked, it doesn't look as skillful is the word I'm looking for, because you lose a lot of definition. There is an argument to say in some areas you might want to link it up slightly, but I would try to keep white areas as much as possible, to show the detail and show the skill. And that's it. Goodbye.